Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the channel. It is 5:40 a.m. East Coast time, Thursday, July 25th, and we have a 6-game MLB slate. There's some like island games or a couple of early games, but I'm just going to be covering the 6-game night slate. So what we have today is a slate filled with interesting pitching options. There's maybe one stud option or two true stud options, but for the most part, it's spread out with a lot of garbage. So we'll break that down. Before we get into the video, my name is Sal Vetri. I cover daily fantasy sports in the NFL, NBA, MLB agency right here, WNBA. There will be a video up by the time you're seeing this one. And I cannot wait for the NFL season, preseason. I'm going to be covering that in a few weeks. Before we get into it, if you give me a like if you're a returning subscriber, it helps me out. If you are not a returning subscriber, consider subscribing. Hitting the red button helps this channel grow, helps me out a ton. All right, 5:40 a.m. We're about to do this. Let's just get right into the video. Lastly, I will let you know that I'm in the middle of a move. I just got here right now. I'm sitting on the floor in my apartment with a green screen behind me. No chair, no desk yet. So I am working on the articles for the MLB slate later today, probably a little earlier. My parents are coming down today to North Carolina from Pennsylvania, 10-hour drive, a big trek. And then we will be moving around and stuff like that. So if you send me messages on Twitter over the next from yesterday to like Saturday, I might not be as active because I'm running around furnishing an apartment, changing my license, getting a new bank account, all the life things, right? Interviews. So sorry, just in advance. But yeah, let's get into it. Otherwise, there is linked up below on Patreon this stat sheet as well as my articles for the MLB slates, my rankings of my pitchers, my rankings of my hitters, one-offs, whatever it might be with analysis. So looking at the slate so far, we have 12 pitchers. There's one probable long reliever as of right now. It's Wade LeBlanc. He's projected at least. I don't think it's official for Seattle versus Detroit. But that's the only note to make on the pitchers from a general standpoint. Otherwise, just getting into my interest, there's 5 guys that I have interest in, 4 of them more so than the 5th. But we'll get to that. Jose Berrios at $10,600 against the White Sox. This is just a spot where the White Sox have struggled against righties all year. That hasn't changed since June 1st. If we're taking a smaller sample than the whole year, but what I would say is a truer sample. They have a 141 ISO since June 1st. That is the second worst on the slate, only to the Kansas City Royals, who are dead last. So bottom 5 ISO is what you're dealing with in the Kansas City White Sox roster. And then when you also take into account that 24.5% K percentage, that's a little bit around average so far for this slate and for the year. So it's an average team in terms of a strikeout opponent for righties against an average strikeout pitcher who strikes out 21.5% of righty batters overall, but they don't have power, and he doesn't give up power with a 1.06 home run per 9, second lowest on the slate, only to Lucas Giolito. The reason that you like Jose Berrios so much is he's a guy who will go deep into the games. 6.36 innings pitched per start. That is over 2/3 of an inning more than the next closest guy in Lucas Giolito. So you are going to get a guy who will go deep into the ball games with Jose Berrios, and then what you're also going to get is a guy who has a nice opponent. His matchup is against a team that overall in the year strikes out a lot. Since June 1st, they're striking out a little bit less, but they still have no power. So Jose Berrios against the White Sox is obviously an interest of mine. It should be an interest of everybody's today on a short 6-game slate. Lucas Giolito against the Twins should not be interesting, especially since as of late his runners left on base percentage has gone down because it wasn't going to stay in the 90s or the high 80s for that long. Now he gets the most difficult team in the league that just went into just 2 amazing games against the Yankees. I hope that ends up being a playoff series. But anyways, Tanaka against Boston, I have no interest on this slate, not at $10,100 either. I don't see the upside there. Even if he wasn't playing Boston at that price tag, just 20% K percentage is really hard for me to get to against any sort of a decent team, especially when Tanaka doesn't go as deep into the games like, say, Jose Berrios does. Jose Suarez at $8,200. This is a steep price tag for this guy who is maybe going to go 5 innings today. 4.6 innings pitched per start. Some of that is skewed, but he is a player that the Angels like a lot. And he gets a Baltimore team that struggles a lot against lefties. They strike out against lefties 25.4% of the time since June 1st. They have no power with a 150 ISO. It's a virtual tie for the lowest on the slate with the Detroit Tigers, and one of the lowest in the league, bottom 3 in the league. So once again, he's going to get a team that just generates no power and strikes out a good amount of the time. Well, what does he do? He strikes out batters and he gives up power. So it's a very scary spot at $8,200, but you can get a high upside strikeout guy on a 6-game slate in the mid-range. He's definitely noteworthy to me. He's the second guy that's in my interests, but I'm not dying to get there. He's not the guy that I said that would be the 5th out of my 5 guys. I'm going to still get to him. But yeah, Jose Suarez is just a guy with strikeout upside, and everything else is kind of scary. The home runs per 9, the hard hit percentage, but it's worth mentioning since Baltimore is so bad against lefties. Now, if you're going to get a Humberto or an Humberto, whatever his name is, batting first like they do against lefties most of the time. They pivot their lineup. I kind of like Baltimore then because you get they kind of try and counteract the lefty on lefties matchups, whatever they might try and do. So Jose Suarez, 8,200 is, I would say, $2,000 or $1,500 overpriced. But it's worth mentioning on a 6-game slate. Adam Pluko, he gets the same matchup against the Kansas City Royals he had a week or two ago, 10 days ago, and he pitched decently well. I think it was a week ago. He pitched decently well. He gave up like a home run in the first inning, but then from there on out, he went, I believe, into the 7th inning. He worked deep into the game. He had a handful, 5-6 strikeouts, and now he gets the same Kansas City Royals team, except now it's probably in a more pitcher-friendly ballpark. And what does he get to do? Well, he only walks 3% of batters. He doesn't strike guys out, but this Kansas City team since June 1st is striking out more and more, and they're also not generating any power. They're dead last, 30th in the league, 137 team ISO against right-handed pitching. So Adam Pluko, he's a favorite today. I like him just like I did 3 days ago. 6,700 is a good price tag. It's a correct price tag, and on a 6-game slate, it's easy to get to. Wade LeBlanc at 5,800. He's going to be the probable long reliever today. It has not been official, but he's the 4th guy in my player pool of interest. Look, he gets Detroit. Detroit's terrible. LeBlanc strikes out 29% of lefties. There'll be 2 to 3 lefties in the Detroit lineup, 1 or 2 true lefties, and then a switch hitting. Nico Goodrum, I believe. And then Wade LeBlanc also is going to benefit from getting the Detroit team that is dead last or bottom 5 in the league in both ISO against lefties, and they're dead last in terms of how much they strike out against lefties since June 1st. So you're going to get a very favorable spot for Wade LeBlanc here, and he's dirt cheap, 5,800. But now, does Wade LeBlanc come out there, and does he throw 5-6 innings, like when he gets hot, and he does, or does he throw 3 innings? Well, that's never guaranteed, but I'd say he's going to be way closer to 5 or 6 innings today against a team that is very bad. Wade LeBlanc is probably going to be the highest owned pitcher on the slate, which is very scary when he has a 1.88 ERA, when he only strikes out 14% of right-handed hitters, and he gives up 200 plus ISO to each side of the plate. Those numbers are extremely scary, right? His strikeout percentage against righties is not that great, and there'll be 6 true righties at least in this Detroit lineup today. So 5,800 though, it kind of counteracts a lot of that because you're saying, okay, Wade LeBlanc, go out there and get me 15 fantasy points, and if Wade LeBlanc is going to come into the game in the 2nd or 3rd inning, he's automatically in line for the win. And I imagine, the lines aren't out yet, but I imagine he's going to be a favorite today. I imagine he will be a favorite today, especially when you look at who's starting for Detroit. So that's my 4th interest on my pitchers. And then the last one is this Drew Verhagen. He's $4,000 flat. That's my only reason I'm interested in him. Let me give you a couple stats, and you're going to be like, why are you interested in this guy? Well, it's his first start in the majors this year. He was a reliever earlier in the year, in like May, with Detroit, and he pitched terrible. His career stats are terrible. He's been bouncing around throughout minor league systems, throughout the Detroit minor league systems, all double AAA. But it's his first start in the last 13 months since June of 2018. He has a 17.8% K percentage overall. That's terrible. That on this slate, overall K percentage would rank. Honestly, there's so many bad pitchers on this slate for overall K percentage since Adam Pluko's bad, since Porcello's bad. He would rank above Pluko. He would rank above Porcello. He would rank above Montgomery, Arado, Eshelman. Oh my God, he'd be in the top half on this slate. He would rank above Brett Anderson. So that 17.8 percentage, that's bad. Like, don't try and get it confused. League average is like around 23% or so. 17.8 is absolutely terrible. And on this slate, which is crazy, he would be the 6th highest. He'd be exactly neutral on this slate, which is just speaking to how bad the slate is. This year, though, he has an 18.9 K percentage. If you take that into account, he'd probably be closer to the 6th highest once again. He has a 10% career walk percentage, and he gives up a 34. This is what I like to see, a 34.3 hard hit percentage in his career. He's giving up 1.2 home runs per 9, but Steamer this year hasn't projected for below one home run per 9, so he's getting a little bit unlucky. He's a bullpen guy, so when he comes out of the bullpen, he's going to strike out less guys. Or when he's a starter, he's going to strike out less guys, so that's worrisome, right? He's a guy who's only striking out 18.5% of batters to start, and now he's going out there and he's only going to strike out less because bullpen guys naturally lose their strikeout stuff because instead of pitching 1 inning, they have to pitch 3, 4, 5, 6. So I don't know how deep he's going to go into the games. He's been a bullpen guy for a while, at least this whole season. Even looking into the minors. So yeah, $4,000 flat is interesting on a 6-game slate to try and get different. He faces a team in Seattle that is going to strike out against right-handed pitching. They strike out 24.5% of the time since June 1st. Overall, K percentage of 25%. His strikeout stuff against righties has been good this year in terms of his bullpen efforts, which is very limited sample, 29%. So don't look into that sample too much at all. I mean, when you look at that sample, you're looking at literally like 8 to 10 innings out of the bullpen. That's going to be naturally higher. It's going to come down to like 20%. So it's going to depend on his ownership. If he's virtually unowned, I'll have interest only because he's $4,000, and I could pair him with Jose Berrios and only spend $11,000 or $14,000 on my pitching. I compare him with Wade LeBlanc and only spend $9,800 on my pitching and do anything I want with my bats, leave money on the table. So he's the fifth guy that I have interest in, but every single thing I just listed to you says bad. The stats that you see in this spreadsheet, if you're downloading it or you're trying to take a screenshot off YouTube, the stats that you see in the spreadsheet right now are off of like an 8-inning sample. When you look at his whole career, when you look at his minor league track record, he's very bad. Again, 18.9% K percentage this year overall, 17.8 in his career. Only gives up 34% hard hit percentage though. Should give up a home run per 9 or less, which is good to see. But the Seattle team against righties, 180 ISO in the year since June 1st. That's around average, so I'm not terrified there. He's interesting because of his price tag, and that's pretty much it. When we go back and we look now at the 5 pitchers that have interest in, because that's pretty much it right now. The hitters I'll list later on in the article. I'm going to try to get that out hopefully earlier today before my parents get here about 4 or 5. But Jose Berrios against the White Sox, he's just the most consistent guy. He's going to go deep into the games. He's going to limit the damage, 1.06 home runs per 9, 5.5% walk percentage. Not going to strike a ton of guys out, but gets a matchup where the team shouldn't really give him too much damage. Jose Suarez is the second guy in my player pool. I'm not too convicted around him. The matchup is nice against Baltimore. They strike out a lot against left-handed pitching. They don't generate a lot of power against left-handed pitching. Suarez is going to be a guy who has upside today because of the fact that he strikes guys out in this matchup, but he has downside because of the fact that he generates no ground balls. 28.3% is by far the lowest on the slate. Highest fly ball rate on the slate at 53.3%. And then he has one of the highest hard hit percentages, 39.8. That usually leads to home runs. Like you see is 2.76 home runs per 9. That's very scary. I'm almost tempted to go to Baltimore depending on these run totals today. The third guy in is Adam Pluko. He's very scary. He doesn't have much upside in terms of strikeouts. He does give up home runs. He'll probably give up a home run today. You just have to hope that he's going to give up only one. You're going to have to hope that he works deep into the games, working 5.36 innings pitched per start. But then you also get the benefit of Kansas City being the least powerful team in the league since June 1st. And striking out more and more versus righties. Wade LeBlanc, 5,800, is probably going to be the chalkiest player on the slate. He doesn't strike out righties at all, 14.3%, but he does strike out lefties. That'll help with 2 to 3 batters, a third of this Detroit lineup. And then this Detroit lineup, overall, they just strike out a lot, so it'll bump up Wade LeBlanc's strikeout stuff. They don't have much power. LeBlanc isn't walking guys at 6%, so he should be able to get 4 or 5 innings. He's going to automatically be in line for the win once he comes into the game. At 5,800, we just need 15 fantasy points out of him. When you get win upside out of him as well, coming into the game in the second, third inning, it becomes a lot easier for him to get there. I do like him at 58. And then Drew Verhagen at $4,000 minimum flat. Yeah, have to have interest in a guy who's only $4,000 flat and against an opponent that will strike out above league average against right-handed pitchers since June 1st. I named every single bad stat against him, so don't come back in my DMs and say, Sal, you said to play this guy. No, I'm letting you know that he's the last guy of my interest on a slate where there's terrible pitching, but only because he's $4,000. His strikeout percentage is terrible. His walk percentage is terrible. His hard hit percentage is decent. His home runs per 9 is decent. So those are damage stats, but there's a lot of things that are really bad with this guy. And we also don't know. He's been in the bullpen for most of the year. Is he going to pitch 2 innings today? Because then that's not great. If he pitches 2 innings and gets you 2 fantasy points, is he going to pitch 4 or 5? So keep an eye on that. It's a high risk spot. I'm probably going to avoid him because I don't think we need to save that much at pitcher today because I'm probably not going to get up to too many pitching options. I think settling for Wade LeBlanc and one of the other pitchers is fine, and that's already a cheap enough guy, even if he is highly owned. Now, if Wade LeBlanc is 40% owned on the slate, well, then yeah, I'll just stack Detroit against him or try and get leverage elsewhere. So this is it right now. It is 5:53, so a quick little 14-minute video or so. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. You can check me out on Twitter at @SalVetriDFS. It's in like the bottom corner of the screen. Patreon's linked up down below. You can support me over there on Patreon. You can get the article. You can get these stat sheets as well. So those are the 5 pitchers, hitters, and stacks and things like that will be in the article if you're looking for more. Let me know what you think about the video down below. And if you're new here, if you could hit the subscribe button, helps me out a ton. Peace out, gang.